Conventicles having been
The
forbidden by law
Autobiography
and
of
frequently
Benjamin
disturbed,
Franklin.
induced some
Chapter
considerable
1.
men of his acquaintance
This is a
to remove
LibriVox
to that
recording.
country,
All
and he was
LibriVox
prevailed with
recordings
them to
are in the
accompany
public
them
domain.
thither,
For
where
more
they
information
expected to
or
enjoy
to
their mode of
volunteer,
religion with
please
freedom.
visit
By the same wife he had
LibriVox.org.
4 children more
The
born
Autobiography
there, and
of
by
Benjamin
a second
Franklin,
wife 10 more,
edited by
in all
Frank
17,
Woodward Payne.
of which I remember
Chapter
13
1.
sitting at one time at
Ancestry
his table,
and
who all
Early
grew up
Youth
to be
in
men and
Boston.
women and married.
Twyford
I was the
at the
youngest
Bishop
son
of St.
and the youngest
Asaph's,
child but 2, and was born in
1771.
Boston, New England.
Begin footnote.
My mother, the second
Twyford
wife,
is a
was
small
Abbess
village
Folger,
not far
daughter
from Winchester
of Peter
in
Folger,
Hampshire,
one of
southern
the first
England.
settlers of New
There
England,
was the
of
county
whom
seat of
honorable
the
mention
Bishop of St.
is made by
Asaph,
Cotton
Dr.
Mather.
Jonathan
In his
Shipley,
church history
the
of
good
that
bishop,
country,
as Dr.
entitled
Franklin used to
Magnalia
style him.
Christi Americana,
Their relations
a
were
godly,
intimate and
learned
confidential
Englishman.
in his
If
pulpit
I remember the
and in the
words
House of
rightly,
Lords, as
I
well
have
as
heard
in
that he
society.
wrote sundry
The
small
bishop
occasional
always
pieces,
opposed
but
the
only
harsh
one of them
measures
was
of the
printed,
crown towards
which
the
I
colonies.
saw now many
End
years since.
footnote.
It was written
Dear
in
son,
1675.
I have ever
in the
had
homespun
pleasure in
verse of
obtaining
that
any
time
little
and people,
anecdotes
and
of my
addressed to those
ancestors.
then concerned
You
in
may
the government
remember the
there.
inquiries I made
It was
among
in
the
favor
remains
of
of my
liberty of
relations when
conscience
you were with
and
me in
in
England,
behalf of
and the
the
journey I
Baptists,
undertook for that
Quakers,
purpose.
and other
Imagining it
sectaries
may be
that
equally
had been
agreeable
under
to you to know the
persecution,
circumstances
ascribing
of my
the
life,
Indian wars,
many
and
of
other
which
distresses
you are yet
that had befallen
unacquainted
the country,
and
to
expecting
that
the enjoyment of a week's
as so many
uninterrupted
judgments
leisure
of God
in
to
my
punish
present
so
country
heinous an
retirement,
offense,
I
and
sit down to
exhorting
write
a
them
repeal
to
of
you,
those
for
uncharitable
which I
laws.
have, besides
The
some
whole
other
appeared
inducements,
to me as
having
written with a
emerged
good
from the
deal of
poverty and
decent
obscurity
plainness
in which I was
and
born
manly freedom.
and bred,
The 6
to a
concluding
state of
lines I
affluence
remember,
and some
though
degree
I
of
have
reputation
forgotten
in the
the 2
world,
first of
and
the
having gone
stanza.
so far through
But
life
the
with a
purport
considerable
of
share of
them
felicity,
was that
the
his
conducting
censures
means I
proceeded
made
from
use
goodwill,
of,
and
which
therefore
with the blessing
he would be
of
known
God
to be
so
the
well
author.
succeeded,
Because
my
to be
posterity
a
may like to
libeller,
know,
says he,
as
I
they may
hate it
find
with
some
my
of them
heart,
suitable
from
for their own
Sherburne
situations,
town, where
and
now
therefore
I
fit
dwell.
to be
My
imitated.
name I do
That
put
felicity,
here.
when I
Without
reflect on
offense,
it,
your
has
real
induced
friend,
me sometimes
it is
to
Peter
say that
Folger.
were it offered
Franklin
to
was born
my
on
choice,
Sunday, January
I would have no
6th,
objection
old
to a
style,
repetition
1706,
of the same
in a house
life
on Milk
from
Street,
its beginning,
opposite the
only
Old South
asking the
Meeting House,
advantages
where he was
authors
baptized on the
have
day of his
in
birth,
second edition
during a
to
snowstorm.
correct some faults of the
The
first.
house where he was
So I
born
might,
was
besides
burned
correcting
in
the faults,
1810.
change some
Cotton
sinister
Mather,
accidents
1663
and
to
events of it for
1728,
others more
clergyman,
favorable.
author,
But
and
though
scholar,
this were
pastor
denied,
of the North
I
Church,
should still
Boston.
accept the offer.
He took an active
Since
part
such a
in the
reputation is not to
persecution
be
of witchcraft.
expected, the next
My elder
thing
brothers
most
were
like
all
living
apprentices
one's
to
life
different
over again
trades.
seems
I
to
was
be a
put to the
recollection
grammar
of that
school at
life,
8 years
and to
of
make
age.
that
My
recollection
father
as durable
intending
as
to
possible
devote me
by
as
putting
the
it down
tithe
in writing.
of his sons
Hereby,
to the
too,
service
I
of the
shall
church.
indulge the inclination
My early
so
readiness
natural
in
in
learning
old
to
men,
read,
to
which
be
must have been
talking
very
of
early,
themselves
as I do not
and their
remember
own past
when I
actions,
could not read,
and I shall
and
indulge
the
it
opinion
without
of all
being
his
tiresome
friends
to others,
that I should
who,
certainly
through
make a
respect
good
to
scholar,
age, might conceive
encouraged him in his
themselves
purpose of
obliged
his.
to give me a
My
hearing,
Uncle Benjamin,
since
too,
this
approved
may
of
be
it,
read
and
or
proposed
not
to give
as
me
any
all
one
his
pleases.
shorthand volumes
And
of
lastly,
sermons.
I
I
may as well
suppose a
confess
stock
it,
to be
since
set
my
up with,
denial of it
if
will
I
be
would
believed
learn
by
his
nobody.
character.
Perhaps I
I
shall
continued,
a
however,
good
at the
deal
grammar school,
gratify
not
my
quite
own
1 year.
vanity.
Though in that
Begin
time I
footnote.
had risen gradually
In this connection,
from the
Woodrow
middle
Wilson
of the class
says,
of that year,
and yet the
to be
surprising
head
and
of it,
delightful thing
and
about
farther
this
was
book is
removed
that,
to the next
take
class
it all
above
in all,
in
it
order to
has
go
not the low
with
tone of
that
conceit,
into the
but is
third
a
at
staunch
the end of
man's
the year.
sober and
But my
unaffected
father, in the
assessment of
meantime,
himself
from a view
and the
of
circumstances
the
of his
expense of a
career,
college education,
given in Hume,
which
the
having
great
so
British
large a
historians,
family,
who were
he could not
contemporaries
well
of Franklin,
afford,
express
and the mean
in their
living
autobiographies
many so
the same
educated
feeling
were
about the
afterwards
propriety
able to obtain.
of just
Reasons that he
self-praise.
gave to his friends in my
End
hearing
footnote.
altered his first intention.
Indeed, I
Took me
scarce
from the
ever
grammar
heard
school
or
and sent me
saw
to a
the
school
introductory
for writing and
words
arithmetic,
without
kept
vanity,
by
I
a
may
then
say,
famous man,
etc.,
Mr.
with
George
some vain
Powell,
thing immediately
very
following.
successful in his
Most people
profession
dislike
generally,
vanity in others,
and by
whatever
mild,
share they
encouraging
have of
methods.
it themselves.
Under him, I
But I give
acquired
it
fair
fair
writing
quarter
pretty soon.
whenever I
But I
meet
failed
with
in the
being
arithmetic
persuaded
and
that
made
it is
no
often
progress in it.
productive to the good
At 10 years
possessor
old, I was taken
and
home
to
to assist
others
my father
that
in
are
his
within
business,
his sphere
which
of
was
action,
that of a
and
tallow
therefore,
chandler and
in many
soap boiler.
cases, it would not be
business he had
altogether
not bred
absurd
to, if a
but
man were
had
to thank
assumed
God for
on
his vanity
arrival in
among
New
the other
England
comforts of
and
life,
on finding his dying
and
trade
now I speak
would
of
not
thanking
maintain
God,
his family,
I desire with
being
all
in little
humility
request.
to acknowledge that
Accordingly,
I
I was
the
employed
mentioned
in
happiness
cutting
of
wick
my
for the
past
candles,
life to his
filling
kind
the dipping
providence,
mold,
which led
and
me
the
to the
molds
means I
for
used
cast
and gave them
candles,
success.
attending the shop,
My belief
going
of this
errands,
induces me to
etc.
hope,
I
though I
disliked
must
the
not
trade and
presume
had a strong
that the same
inclination
goodness
for the sea,
will still
but
be
my
exercised
father declared
toward
against
me
it.
in continuing
However,
that happiness,
living near the water,
or enabling
I
me
was
to
much
bear a
in and
fatal
about it,
reverse,
learned early
which
to
I
swim
may
well,
experience
and to
as
manage
others have
boats,
done,
and the
when
complexion
in
of
of
my
my
future
future
fortune
with other boys,
being known
I was
to him
commonly
only
allowed to govern,
in whose power
especially
it
in
is
any case
to
of
bless
difficulty,
to us,
and upon
even
other
our
occasions I was
afflictions.
generally a
The
leader
notes
among the boys,
one of my
and
uncles,
sometimes led them
who
into
had
scrapes,
the same
of which
kind
I will
of
mention
curiosity
one instance,
in
as
collecting
it
family
shows
anecdotes,
an early
once put into
projecting
my
public
hands,
spirit,
furnished me
though
with
not
several
then
particulars
justly
relating
conducted.
to our ancestors.
There was a
From
salt
these
marsh
notes I
that
learned that
bounded
the family
part
had
of the
lived
mill
in the
pond,
same village,
on the edge of
Ecton,
which,
at
in
high
Northamptonshire,
water, we used to stand
for
to fish for
300
minnows.
years.
By
And
much
how
tramping,
much
we had made
longer
it
he
a
knew
mere
not.
quagmire.
Perhaps
My
from the
proposal
time
was
when
to
the
build
name
a
of
wharf
Franklin,
there fit
that
for us to
before
stand upon,
was the name
and I
of
showed
an
my
order of
comrades a
people,
large heap of stones,
footnote,
which
a
were
small
intended for a new
landowner,
house near the marsh,
end footnote,
and which would
was
very well suit
assumed
our purpose.
by then as a
Accordingly, in the
surname,
evening,
when
when
others
workmen
took
were gone,
surnames,
I
all
assembled
over the
a
kingdom.
number of my playfellows,
On a freehold of
and
about
working
30
with them
acres,
diligently,
aided by the Smith's
like
business,
so many emmets,
which had continued in the
sometimes
family
2
till
or
his
3
time,
to a
the
stone,
eldest son
we brought
being
them all
always bred
away
to that
and
business,
built our little
a
wharf.
custom which he and
The next
my
morning
father
the
followed
workmen were
as to their
surprised
eldest
at missing
son.
the stones,
When I
which
searched
were
the
found in
registers
our wharf.
at Ecton,
Inquiry
I
was
found
made
an
after
account
the
of their
removals.
births,
We were
marriages,
discovered
and
and
burials
complained of.
from the year
Several of
1555
us
only,
were corrected
and
by
there
our
being no
fathers,
registers
and
kept in that
though I
parish
pleaded the
at any
usefulness of
time
the work,
preceding.
Mine
By that
convinced me
register,
that
I
nothing was
perceived that I
useful
was the
which
youngest
was not
son
honest.
of the
I
youngest
think you may like to
son
know something
for
of
5
his person and
generations
character.
back.
He
My
had an excellent
grandfather
constitution
Thomas,
of body,
who was born in
was of middle
1598,
stature,
but
lived
well
in
set
Ecton until
and
he
very
grew
strong.
too old to
He was
follow
ingenious,
business longer.
could draw prettily,
When he went
was
to
skilled
live with
a
his
little
son
in
John,
music,
a
and
dyer
had a clear,
at
pleasing
Branbury,
voice,
in
so that when he played
Oxfordshire,
psalm
and
tunes
whom
on his
my
violin,
father served
and
as
sung
an
the
apprentice,
fall,
as he
there
sometimes
my grandfather
did
died and
in an
lies buried.
evening after the
We saw
business
his
of the day was
gravestone
over.
in
It was extremely
1758.
agreeable to
His
hear.
eldest son,
He had a
Thomas,
mechanical genius,
lived
too,
in the house
and on
at Ecton,
occasion
and left
was very
it
handy
with
in the use of
land
other
to
tradesmen's
his only
tools.
child,
But
a
his
daughter,
great excellence
who,
lay in
with
a
her
sound
husband, one
understanding,
Fisher,
and
of
solid judgment in
Wellingborough,
prudent matters,
sold it to
both
Mr.
in private
Isted,
and public
now
affairs.
lord of the
In
manor
the latter,
there.
indeed,
My
he was never
grandfather had
employed.
4 sons
The
that grew
numerous
up.
families
He had to educate,
Thomas, John,
and
Benjamin, and
of his
Josiah.
circumstances.
I will give you
kept him
what
close
account
to
I can
his
of
trade,
them,
but
at
I
this
remember
distance
well
from
his
my
being
papers,
frequently visited
and if
by leading
these
people
are not
who
lost in
consulted
my
him
absence,
for his opinion in
you
affairs
will among
of the
them
town,
find many
or
more
of the church
particulars he belonged to.
Thomas was bred
and
a
showed
smith
a good
under
deal
his
of
father,
respect for his
but
judgment and
being
advice.
ingenious
He was
and
also much
encouraged in
consulted
learning,
by private
as
persons
all my brothers
about their
were,
affairs
by
when any
an
difficulty
Esquire
occurred,
Palmer,
and
then the
frequently
principal
chosen
gentleman in
an
that
arbiter
parish.
between
He
contending
qualified
parties.
himself for the
At
business
his
of
table he
scrivener,
liked to have,
became a
as often
considerable
as he
man in
could,
the county,
some
was a
sensible
chief
friend or
mover
neighbor
of all
to
public-spirited
converse with,
undertakings,
and always took care
for
to
the
start
county,
some ingenious
or town of
or useful
Northampton,
topic for discourse,
and his own
which
village,
might tend to
of
improve
which
the
many
minds of his
instances
children
are related
by
of him,
this means
and
he
which
turned our
taken
attention
notice
to what was
of
good
and
just and
patronized
prudent
in the
by
conduct
the
of
then
life.
Lord Halifax.
And little or no
he
notice
died in
was ever taken
1702
of what related
January
to the
6th,
victuals on
old
the table,
style, just 4
whether
years
it
to
was
the day
well
before
or
I was
ill-dressed,
born, in
again
or out of
footnote,
season,
of
January
good or bad
17th,
flavor,
new style,
preferable
this change in the
or
calendar was
inferior
made
to
in
this or that other
1582
thing of the kind
by Pope Gregory
so that was
the
how
13th,
I was
and
brought
adopted
up
in England
such a perfect
in
attention to
1752
those matters
every
as to be
year
quite
whose number
indifferent
in the
what
common
kind of food
reckoning
was set
since
before
Christ,
me,
and
is
so
not divisible by
unobservant
4,
of it,
as
that
well
to this
as
day,
every
if
year,
I am
whose
asked,
number
I can
is
scarce tell a
divisible
few
by
hours after
100,
dinner
but
but
what
not
I
by
dined
four,
upon.
shall have
This
365
has been a convenience
days,
to me
and
in
all other
traveling,
years shall have
where my
366
companions have
days.
been sometimes
In the
very
18th
unhappy
century, there
for
was a
want of a
difference
suitable
of 11
gratification
days between
of
the
their
old
more
and new
delicate,
style of
because
reckoning,
better
which
instructed,
the English Parliament
tastes
cancelled
and appetites.
by making the 3rd of
My
September,
mother had likewise an
1752,
excellent constitution.
the 14th.
She suckled all her
The
10
Julian
children.
calendar, or
I
Old
never
Style,
knew whether
is
my
still
father or
retained
mother
in Russia and
to
Greece,
have any
whose
sickness,
dates
but
consequently
that
are
of
now
which
13
they died.
days behind
He
those
had
of
89,
other Christian countries.
and she had
And
85
footnote,
years of age.
the account we
They
received
lie
of his
buried
life
together at
and
Boston.
character from
I
some
some
old
years
people
since
at Ecton,
placed a marble
I
over
remember,
their grave,
struck you as
with this
something
inscription:
extraordinary.
Josiah
From
Franklin,
its
similarity to what you knew
his
of mine.
life. Had he died on the
returned.
same day, you
They
said,
lived
one might have
lovingly
supposed
together in
a
wedlock
transmigration.
55 years.
John was
without
bred a
an
dyer,
estate
I
or any
believe,
gainful
of Lowland.
employment.
Benjamin
By
was
constant
bred a
labor
silk
and
dyer,
industry,
serving an
with
apprenticeship
God's
in
blessing,
London.
they
He was an
maintained a large
ingenious man.
family
I
comfortably,
remember him well.
and brought up 13
For when I was a
children
boy,
and
he
7
came over to my
grandchildren
father in Boston
reputably.
and lived in the
From
house
this
with us
instance,
some
reader,
years.
be encouraged
He
to
lived
diligence
to
in
a
thy
great
calling,
age,
and
his
distrust
grandson,
not providence.
Samuel Franklin,
He was a
now
pious
lives in
and
Boston.
prudent man.
He left behind
She
him
a
2
discreet and
quarto
virtuous
volumes,
woman.
manuscripts
Their youngest
of
son,
his own poetry,
in
consisting
faithful
of
regard to
little
their memory,
occasional pieces
places this
addressed
stone.
to his friends and relations.
J.F., born
of which the
1655,
following
died
sent me is a
1744.
specimen. He had
at
formed a
89.
shorthand of his own, which he
A.F.,
taught
born
me, but never practiced.
1667,
I
died
have now forgotten it.
1752.
I was named after this
85.
uncle, there being
This marble
a
having
particular
decayed,
affection
the
between him and
citizens
my
of Boston
father.
in
He
1827
was very
erected
pious,
in its place
a great
granite obelisk,
attendee of
21
sermons of
feet
the
high,
best preachers,
bearing the original
which he took down
inscription
in his
quoted
shorthand
in the text,
and had with
and
him
another
many
explaining
volumes of them.
the erection of
He
the
was
monument.
also much of a politician.
By
By
my
my
rambling
rambling
digressions,
digressions,
I
there
perceive
fell
myself
lately
to be
into my
grown
hands
old.
in London
I
a
used to
collection
write
he
more
made of all the
methodically,
principal
but one
pamphlets
does not dress
relating
for
to
private
public
company,
affairs
as
from
for a
1641
public ball.
to
His
1770.
perhaps only negligence.
Many of the volumes
To return,
are wanting,
I continued
as
thus
appears
employed
by
in
the
my
number,
father's
but there
business
still remain
for 2
8
years.
volumes in
That
folio,
is, till I was
and
12 years
24
old,
in
and my brother
quarto,
John,
and in
who was bred to
octavo.
that business,
a dealer in
having
old
left
books
my
met
father,
with them,
married
and
and
knowing
set up
me
for
by
himself
my
at Rhode
sometimes
Island.
buying of him,
There
he
was
brought
all
them to me.
appearance that I was
Since my
destined
uncle
to
must have left
supply
them
his
here
place
when he went
and
to
become a
America,
tallow chandler.
which was about 50
But my
years
dislike to
since.
the trade
There
continued.
are many
My father
of his
was under
notes and
apprehensions
margins
that
if he did
the
not
obscure
find one
family
for
of
me more
ours was
agreeable,
early
I
in
should
the
break away and
Reformation
go to sea,
and continued
as his son
Protestants
Joshua had
through the
done,
reign of Queen
to
Mary,
his great
when they were
vexation.
sometimes
He
in danger
therefore
of trouble
sometimes
on
took
account
me
of
to
their
walk
zeal
with
against
him and see
popery.
joiners. They
Bricklayers,
had got an English
turners,
Bible, and to
braziers,
conceal and
etc.
secure it,
at their
it was
work,
fastened
that he
open
might
with
observe
tapes
my inclination
under
and
and
endeavor
within the
to
cover
fix it
of
on
a
some
joint
trade or
stool.
other
When
on
my
land.
great-great-grandfather
It has
read
ever
it to
since
his
been a
family,
pleasure to me
he turned
to
up
see
the
good
joint
workmen
stool
handle
upon
their
his
tools.
knees,
And it
turning
has
over
been
the
useful
leaves,
to me,
then under
having
the
learnt
tape.
so much by
One
it
of the children
as to
stood
be
at
able
the door
to
to
do
give
little
notice
jobs
if
myself
he
in my
saw
house,
the
when a
apparator
workman
could not
coming,
readily be got,
who was an
and
officer
to
of the
construct
spiritual
little
court.
machines for my
In that
experiment.
case, the stool was
While
turned
the
down
intention
again
of
upon
making
its feet.
the experiment
When the Bible
was
remained
fresh and
concealed
warm
in
in
my
my
mind
mind.
as before.
My father
This
at last
anecdote
fixed
I had
upon
from my uncle
the
Benjamin,
cutler's trade.
the family,
And my uncle
continued
Benjamin's
all
son
of the
Samuel,
Church of England,
who was
till
bred
about
to
the
that
end of
business
Charles
in London,
II's reign,
being about
when
that
some
time
of the
established in
ministers had
Boston.
been outed
I was sent
for
to be with
nonconformity,
him sometime
holding
on
conventicles
but his
in
expectations
Northampshire,
of a fee with
Benjamin
me
and
displeased
Joshua
my father
adhered to
I
them,
was taken home
and
again.
so continued all
End
their
of chapter
lives.
1.